Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What are the conditions for valid slaughter? What are the conditions for valid slaughter? Very relevant because we are quickly approaching Eid al-Adha, which is the Eid, the celebration or the festival of the Adha, the Udhiyah, the sacrifice. And this is a celebration. It is an Eid that follows the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and we are very quickly approaching that. So we can go through some of the rules bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. They are somewhat extensive. We'll try to keep them as basic as possible. And I would like to invite all of our viewers and all of our students to consider signing up for a formal learning program such as the Ship of Salvation. As you know, this is the Shafi'i video answers segment, but we also have complete Shafi'i courses all the way from beginners, such as the Ship of Salvation, which has started just 3 weeks ago, to more advanced courses like Reliance of the Traveler. And you can sign up for free on seekersguidance.org to take these courses. And by doing so, you can systematically learn your religion, as opposed to learning from individual questions that benefits but does not form part of a larger structure. You can also benefit from a formal structure of learning, which is the most beneficial way of learning. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us success. So in terms of slaughtering, hunting and slaughtering, in fact, it is not permissible to eat an animal until it has been properly slaughtered. The only exceptions to which are fish and locusts. Now that requires some explanation, but it would deviate from the question itself, so we'll limit it at that. Fish and locusts may be eaten even though unslaughtered. Like nobody slaughters fish when they catch fish. We catch the fish and we can eat the fish in that sense. Then it is unlawful to eat meat that is slaughtered by Zoroastrians, someone who has left Islam, an idol worshipper. And when it comes to people of the book, it is permissible to consume the sacrifice of the people of the book if they slaughter according to the rules set out in sacred law. And then the people of the book, more specifically in the Shafi'i school, are not all the people of the book, but only those whose lineage can be traced back to the time before the religions of the people of the book were changed and altered. So in other words, they were part of the original tribes of the Bani Israel, and only that. So it's quite restrictive in the Shafi'i school, and therefore it's not as simple as saying, okay, it's meat of the people of the book, so we can consume. So there's some details there. So that's some prelude. Then in relation to the instrument of slaughter itself, it is permissible to slaughter with anything that has a cutting edge, except for a tooth, a bone, a claw, etc. Things that are part of humans or animals or attached to a body. Now, those matters that sort of had previous biological life, we cannot use that. Generally speaking, people would use a knife, a blade, and it's permissible to slaughter with any knife or blade that has a sharp cutting edge. The necessary condition for slaughtering any animal which is within one's capacity to slaughter, whether it is domesticated or wild, is to cut both the windpipe as well as the gullet. So the windpipe is the channel through which the animal takes a breath, and the gullet is the channel through which the animal consumes food. So the windpipe and the food pipe, these two pipes must be severed entirely, right? Interestingly, it is not necessary for the validity of slaughter that the carotid arteries, which are two blood vessels on either side of the windpipe and the food pipe, it is not necessary for those to be severed, though it is practically impossible to sever the food pipe and the windpipe without severing the carotid arteries. So, in my estimation here, the Shafi'i sacred law, it specifically gives you the objective of severing the windpipe and the food pipe, because that is somewhat more difficult. It's not difficult at all, but it is easier to sever the carotid arteries than to sever those. So by severing those, you definitely cut enough to make sure that all feeling to the animal's brain, all pain and so forth is immediately severed. Thus, the animal feels absolute minimal pain through that type of cutting. طيب. Then, if the slaughterer neglects to cut any part of the windpipe or the food pipe and the animal dies, right, then the animal is considered unslaughtered, meaning it is maita, it is not slaughtered, it is not halal to consume. If the slaughterer sacrifices the animal and cuts part of that pipe, but then part remains attached, and the slaughterer then returns to sever the rest, if he returned after the animal's life had already been removed and the animal only has reflexive movements, then this is also considered to be unslaughtered. And Allah knows best. It is considered to be makruh, completely disliked, to slaughter an animal from the back of the neck until he severs the windpipe and the gullet. It is a sin because of the excess pain that is caused. Though it is valid as slaughtering, right? It is still valid. Chopping off the heads of chickens with a hatchet is considered makruh, though the meat would still be considered lawful. Then, in terms of recommendations, the slaughterer should cut swiftly and not take his time, such that he has to cut 2 or more times. Ideally, when sacrificing, it should take one swift cut of the blade and the animal should be slaughtered. In other words, all of the necessary passages have been severed entirely. And I've experienced this. I've slaughtered animals, many animals in the past, both smaller animals and larger animals. And if your blade is sharp enough and you are strong enough and you are trained, then the maximum number of cuts that you really need for a large animal is 3 cuts, and for a small animal is 1 cut. Like for a sheep or a goat, it should be 1 cut. Unfortunately, many people would like to participate in the sacrificial ibadah, but without training and without the necessary skills, you may cause harm to the animal, and this is absolutely not allowed in our sacred law, and Allah knows best. So you should take as swift movements as possible, and he should not take his time. He should not have any unnecessary motion or cutting. And if he does, what happens is if he cuts and he doesn't cut properly, and the animal then dies, or the animal, how do I put this? The animal is on the verge of complete death, so the movement is about to stop, and the slaughterer is still busy. This is considered an unslaughtered animal. In fact, our sacred law indicates that one shouldn't even lift the blade from the animal's neck. It should be completely cut within the first touch. With the first touch of the blade to the neck, it should be completely severed. Some of the other recommendations is that the animal be turned to face the direction of the Qibla, to sharpen the knife but not in front of the animal. It is recommended to cut rapidly. We've mentioned this. It is recommended, actually very recommended, to mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala verbally, to say Bismillah. In the Hanafi school, it is considered obligatory, and Shafi'is should observe this. Though if the person forgets to say Bismillah, the Muslim person who cuts, it is still considered halal in the Shafi'i school. It is recommended to also send salutations, salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and it is recommended to slaughter the animal by way of making sure to cut the large blood vessels as well. As we said, it's not a requirement, but it is recommended to make sure that that is done as well. And as I mentioned, by severing the food pipe and the windpipe, automatically those vessels are also slaughtered. Then there are different ways to sacrifice much larger animals like a camel, but we won't get into that because that is far less prevalent, right? It is not as ubiquitous as smaller animals, and Allah knows best. Then finally, it is a necessary condition. I think I've alluded to this one before, but it is a necessary condition that the slaughterer not raise his knife hand while slaughtering. In other words, while drawing it across the neck of the animal. And if it left before completely severing both the windpipe and the gullet, and then returns to cut them after the animal only has reflexive movement left, the animal is considered unlawful to eat. So do take extra precaution in relation to that. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So that concludes the question on the conditions of valid slaughter.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.